I'm going to share a little bit about my story, and I really appreciate all of the other folks that got up here and shared about being incarcerated, about suffering mass incarceration, and that you made it out. I'm just happy and welcome home, and I'm thankful you made it out. And so going back, and so with Rose, I was talking about this earlier. My mother we're Assiniboine and Arapaho, and I don't know who my father is. And she was from Fort Peck, up in that area. And when her mother died, she was adopted by a white family and brought out to California. And then she had 3 children, and we never knew that side. We never got to experience that side. But she used to tell us about it. She used to tell us about her mother and about, the tribe and this and that. And I was always curious about it, but never got to experience the culture. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And things would happen in our lives, spiritual things would happen. And she's like, oh, that's my mother. This is that. I'm like, okay. Became very curious. But this white family that brought her out here really abused the hell out of her. It was supposed to be to a better home, but all the kinds of abuse you could think of, sexual, physical, emotional. And she grew up with all that trauma, and she passed it on to us 3 kids. She never got to deal with that. And so she passed it on to us and acted it out on us with her actions, her emotions, and then with other men that came into our lives. And so me, my brother, and my sister suffered the same things. And as we went through that, we didn't know how to deal with it. She didn't know how to deal with it. So we're all just going through it. And then had a stepfather, and my mother and my stepfather were both addicted to drugs, didn't know how to deal with that. They had that spirit of addiction in them, and they trapped it inside themselves, I believe. And as we went through that, they taught me some business skills. Like, we knew how to market, we knew how to sell, we knew how to do profit and loss in our head. And so all those things I learned from my mom and dad. I learned how to use, sell, and market dope. And so it was a skill I learned at a very young age, from like 5 years on. And so fast forward a little bit, I get heavily involved in California gangs and running the streets, doing these things. And by the time I'm 16 years old, I'm selling drugs, using any kind of drugs out there, alcohol. And I murder somebody to keep my addiction going, to keep fueling it. And rob and murder somebody. And it was horrible. Went into prison at 16 years old, got a life sentence. First offense, the judge told me, yeah, you're a menace to society. You're one of the monsters that we talk about. And so, was never supposed to get out. Went into prison at 16, went through the whole gamut. I didn't change right away. I was still heavily into gangs, still heavily into doing whatever I wanted to do to feel better. And to feel better about myself and mask my emotions and stuff them down. And so then got into that, got deeper and deeper involved, and to where I ended up in the shoe. I was supposed to be staying there for the rest of my life, which you were talking about earlier. Ad sig, the shoe, whatever it is. They're like, you're validated, you're never coming out. This is it, your life is over. And I had a moment in there. I came back from the little, what we called the dog kennels, and I was staring at this piece of metal that I signed up with powdered tooth powder, and I shined it up, and I looked at myself, and mind you, I thought I was smart as hell, thought I was running shit, thought I was doing all this, and I looked, and I'm like, all you're in control of is a pair of boxers and a bar of soap. And I was like, this is what my best thinking got me. And so at that moment, I was like, I want to change my conditions. It wasn't that I had a big epiphany, like I wanted to, like all my values changed, everything. It's like, I just want to change my conditions right now. And so I was like, okay, this life is over, I'm done. I made a decision right there, told everybody, and I knew that, the gang I was involved with, I was like, oh, they're gonna want to kill me now. Come to my surprise, came up with an event, they were like, hey, Rich, go. You did enough. This was after doing about 20 years inside. They were like, go home. You've done enough. Mind you, I've been in a lot of riots, and yeah, just a lot of pain and suffering throughout all this. And that surprised me, the love I got from them. They're like, just go home. And I was like, damn, all right. And so from then on, but the next day was the hardest thing in my life because I realized that I had just let all the values and this whole person I thought I was, my whole life, go. I was like, who the hell am I now? I get to make decisions for myself. I no longer have to live by this gang code or this drug code or this code and these values I was living by my whole life. And so I had to figure myself out for the first time. And what do I want? And so, I mean, it was down to like, do I want to go outside today? Do I even want to put on my shoes? These were decisions I never even made for myself. They were made for me. So all these things came up, and I started making decisions, and my life got better and better and better. Within 10 years, I was out of prison. And met a group of people inside, though. I don't want to go there yet. But met a group of people inside when we were inside. Mind you, all those people that were in the gang, there was a lot of love there. They weren't all destructive. No, not all of it. We have multiple sides. There's a lot of love. There's violence. There's all these things going on. But we created a community in there that didn't have anything to do with the outside. And it was a community of care, of trust, and love, of where we could start sharing with each other like some of the most shameful things we did and some of the most shameful things that were done to us. And we started opening up about that. And that's where our healing began. And we created those communities on the yard, in the middle of the field, when we would be able to have little groups and we would talk about it with each other. There didn't have to be a staff member there or a volunteer coming from inside. We were doing this with each other and holding each other with that love and that care. And so we did that. And then also we had all the groups that we would go to that we needed to get on paper and that we wanted to attend in order to get out. But it was at this time, all through that time, I had no hope of getting out. And I went through education. I got college up to yin yang, but I had 250 units, but I was like, I'm not going for a degree. I'm never getting out. I don't care. I just want to learn all this stuff about psychology, sociology, business, learned it all. And I was like, I don't want a degree. I don't care about your system's degree. I just want to learn. And so doing all of that, and then we created these groups inside, and this, it was, for a better lack of terms, a therapeutic community. But it was it was across all races and all ethnic groups. And it was just a bunch of men, whether you're straight, you're non-binary, whatever you identified with, we were like, let's do this, let's talk. And that building of trust was one of the most loving things I got in there. And I remember this one man coming up to me. What you were saying earlier is like we opened up to anybody. It didn't matter whether you committed a murder, committed a sexual harm, harmed a child. We're like, we just want to do some healing work. And so I had one man come up to me and he was like, I've been watching you. And I was like, what? And he's like, I just want to see if it's safe. Can I talk to you? He said, I see you going over to these groups and doing this thing and doing all these things. I was like, sure. We went out to the middle of the field. And he was like, can we talk over here? And I'm like, yes. And so we went into the middle of the field and he was like, I want to tell somebody this, but he had killed a child. And he's like, I've never told anybody. He said, I passed lie detector test, all of this. He said, but I just want to tell somebody. And I was like, all right. And he tells me the whole story. And he's like, how do you feel about it? I said, I can't stand what you did, but I love the fact that you're working on it. And he's like, can we talk again? I'm like, yes. He's like, but are you going to tell anybody? I was like, no, I'm not going to tell anybody. Like, this is a safe space for you to say whatever you need to say. Let's work on this. And so created that kind of environment with so many men there to where we had groups, and it changed the culture of that yard and that prison to where people could start opening up, start healing, and getting rid of the shame. And so we did that and created a very loving community. And then Then I became a drug and alcohol counselor also inside, and so was doing that for years before I got out. And it was awesome, but like I heard somebody else say, I didn't really agree with the theory of abstinence. You need to be abstinent to get treatment, and but we're trying to heal people. Like, they're not gonna be sober, they're not gonna be perfect to get some healing. So I didn't agree with that piece of it. And then fast forward, in 2015, I went to the Border Patrol hearings, and they were like, oh, you're ready to go home. They granted me a date. They said, go home. You're done with this. And then the governor decided, you're not. In California, the governor can review your parole grant and just take it away. And so that's what he did. And that was hard, but I had this group of men and this group of people around me that I could talk to about that. And then it was during that time that, from 2015 to 2018, that we started another group called Realize. And it was another group is restorative justice that came in. And like hearing about that, I was like, oh yeah, we do this work. This is what you all call it out there. Native people call it peacemaking. Other people call it different things. But I was like, oh yeah, this is something that we'll figure out as humans, like how to heal with each other. And so we created that group inside. She did, and some others. And so started that, and then we actually created the curriculum inside with people. And with the people in there, like they would bring in materials and we would talk about it. We would talk about patriarchy. We would talk about mass incarceration, toxic masculinity. Where did I learn how to be a man? All these things, how to be a toxic man. And then how do I get rid of that? And so we talked about all these things and we worked it out to where we built trust with each other. We could talk about all this stuff. And then in 2018, I had another parole grant. And they were like, okay, you can go home again. Went to the governor this time, he did nothing, so I got to come home. And came home, and like somebody else said, it got a little worse. It got a little worse. I have PTSD, don't know, I'm watching everything, and then I'm at this reentry house that is the best one in Alameda County in Oakland. I got accepted to, and I get there and I get dropped off. And I get dropped off because you can't bring your family, you can't bring your loved ones inside. And they're like, when are we going to see you again? I'm not sure. I don't know if they have a blackout period. I don't know what they're going to let me do, what they're not going to let me do. And so go inside. They're like, yeah, they can't come in. You'll be able to leave tomorrow morning again at 6:30. And then you have to be back in the house by 9. But you have to do these programs. And so there was 32 of us in this house, in a 5-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. And yeah, this was one of the best programs in Alameda at that time. And I was like, oh shit. And I'm in a room with 3 bunk beds and 6 men. And I'm like, I'm 46 years old. What the hell am I doing in a bunk bed here? This doesn't make any sense. Find out later that it's all for profit. So this guy who's running this house is an ex-probation parole officer. He gets $16,000 per person every 6 months from the state to pack this house. The services he offers us the services we have to do in order to have this housing and not get violated and go back to prison. Because if you're a life prisoner, if you were serving a life sentence and you got let out, you had to have housing, otherwise you get violated and go back to prison. And so I had to go do drug and alcohol treatment in the morning from 9 to 2 in the afternoon. And the guy that was running this is like, why are you here? You know all this shit. I said, because I have to do it for the program. And he's like, oh, and I'm like, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor. He's like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like, no, I shouldn't, but I need my housing. I don't want to go back to prison. And then at night, I had to go to another group to get resume building, learn how to use computers, and to get a job. I had a job. I had an organization to go and work at, but I couldn't go because of this program's requirements. And I was certified by Apple and IBM, had all this computer tech skills. So I'm like, why the hell am I doing this? And then they're trying to get me to teach others for their program. I'm like, that's not my job. That's what you do. And so went through all of this, and I'm like, this has to change. This doesn't work. And then when I tried to leave the house, I found some other place to go to. that's the person that was running it was like, oh, this is great, you're leaving, you know, you got this, you got that. Calls my parole officer, says he can't leave. Like really two-faced. He can't leave because he has to complete this program for board. And me, I'm not one to sit back and just let things happen to me. And I'm like, that's not what my parole conditions say. This is just recommended. It's not mandated. And my parole officer's like, really? And I show it to him, and he's like, oh, okay, go. Go do what you want. And so to really advocate for myself. And so after I saw that, I was like, this shit has to change. Excuse my language. I forgot you're filming. But I was like, this reentry stuff needs to change. Like how we treat people, what we do has to change. Because in California, there's only 3 ways that reentry runs. And it's through treatment, drug and alcohol treatment, transitional housing, which is for people that are suffering homelessness. But us coming out of prison, we were stuck in those. And then there's supportive living, but that's only for our elders to go to. And so we would have to go to these programs, and they're 6-month stays based on law. So you'd go there for 6 months, sometimes you'd get an extension. And so I was like, okay, we got to figure out how we can change this. And so I was like, we went to some funder we knew and asked her, hey, this is my dream. I want to open up a reentry home that is different from what's out there, that treats people differently. And so went to her, drew out a plan, and it was basically putting people first. And you'll notice it over there on the table. It's like person-centered. We put out a report about 6 months ago. But it's like doing reentry in a different way. And so we want people-centered, not the program-centered. Like, don't come in here to do what the program needs. Let's figure out what you were saying earlier. What do you need? What is it that you need support with? And let's figure out that. And we have like 6 values. You know, agency is at the top and foremost when somebody comes out. Like, what is it that you want? What is it that you need? What do you want to do with your life? And you don't have to pay for anything. Like, that's my job to get the funding for it. But you don't have to pay for your housing. All your basic needs are met. You have food, you have clothes, like the food is stocked, and then here's another $150 to get your Zoom and Wham-Whams, whatever you want. Here's another $150, buy clothes each month. And then another $200 on top of that just to be. And then we give them unlimited clipper cards so they can get around and teach them, like, this is how you use this when they're ready. And so we had one person come in, and he just wanted to walk around the neighborhood for a month. I'm like, go ahead. You don't have to get a job right away. Just figure out where you're at. And doing this, you know, it was really from my own experience of not having that opportunity to do that. And I wished I would have. And so, like, offering this to people when they come out. And so agency is huge within our organization and our values. And like everything we do is with agency at the center, is to keep asking people what they want, what they need support in, and keep fueling that, keep helping in that way. And so we now have 2 reentry homes, and it's like there's one house with 6 bedrooms, and there's another house with 5. So we have 11 people. Everybody gets their own room. You don't have to come and cell up with somebody. It's done in a very non-carceral way. We don't want it to mimic the carceral system in any which way. And we had some great interns from the high school come, and they were hearing about it, and they're like, oh, this is supposed to be a great program and all this. And they went into the house, and they're like, Richard, this is just a house. I'm like, exactly, it's just a house. And I said, but it's the way we treat people that live in the house, that they're not offered this. I said, it's just a house, and for people to be offered that is extraordinary out here that come out of incarceration. And so it's been great. I know I'm missing some things probably, but yeah, going through that. And then we also, so that's my dream with that, was to create that. And then we came out with this memo. And and this is one other thing I want to tell you before. It's like, it's both men, women, non-identified people. Whatever you identify with, we don't That's not up to us. And people said, oh, you're crazy, Richard. What the hell are you doing? You're going to have problems. I said, we're going to have problems if it's all men or if it's all women or if it's non-binary. We're going to have problems, period, because they're people. And I said, we just have to learn how to deal with each other. And so, and when they leave this house and they go have housemates somewhere else, guess what? They're going to have some problems. And so learning how to deal with that shit is just it's common sense. We have problems in the house, like shit, with my kids, with Eric. So, yeah, and then we run it in a restorative way, is where our main rule is do no harm, ahimsa rule. Do no harm to yourself or others. And what that means is if me and you are in the house together and you have a parole condition that says you can't have drugs, I'm not going to bring drugs into the house. You can't have alcohol, I'm not bringing alcohol into the house. And now, is this rule always followed? Hell no, it's not. We're dealing with people and they make mistakes. But to approach it in a restorative way is we've had people that have smoked weed. We've had people that have got into physical altercations. And we're like, okay, so how do we deal with this? We're going to sit down, we're going to talk about it. And we're going to figure out a way to get through this. But the first thing is when we sit down, me being in that person of authority and position is the first thing I have to reassure somebody is you're not getting kicked out. You don't have to go back into survival mode to where you're like, oh shit, I'm going to lose everything if I admit something here. So let's figure out how this will work with us. And so we sit down and we talk about it. And I remember the person that was smoking weed. I was like, yeah, so I walked in here last week. You were burning incense, trying to hide up weed. I said, we're not stupid. Come on. I've been doing that shit my whole life. I know exactly what you're doing. And somebody else yeah, I walked in, this was happening. She's like, yeah, I've been smoking. It's like, look, this is all we're asking for. I'm like, New York over here, he's got parole conditions. She's like, yeah, she's like, I'm gonna go grab this shit and take it out to my car right now. And that's what she did. I'm like, cool, that's good. I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just telling you not to harm anybody here. That's what we want as a community. And it's about community accountability. And so that's the very restorative way. And then there's a lot of flexibility. What I mean by that is we're not one of those houses where you come and nobody can come in. If your family's coming in or you come home, they fly in from LA, New York, wherever it is, it's like, oh, what are they going to do? No, they don't drop you off at the door. They could stay the night. You ask the housemates, if it's cool, they stay the night. If your partner wants to come over, you ask the housemates, it's up to you all. It's not up to us. Yes, we're the directors and we're all that and these titles that we're giving, but it's up to you all who live in the house as a community, what you all want to do. And then we'll figure it out from there. And so one of the things that is when a bed or a room comes open is the residents who live there decide who comes in next. We don't work on referrals. If you have somebody that you know is getting out, or you know somebody that's in another home that isn't doing it this way, they want to come over, they meet with the whole house and talk about it. And that house decides. And it's not us in these positions of authority that do that. Because we're not going to mimic that system in any way. We're not going to give you a cellie and assign you a cellie again. And so my goal with this is with the memo and everything else we put it out there because we want to change the culture of how our people are being treated coming out. We don't want them to have to go to mandatory programs that they don't want to go to. If you want drug and treatment, go there. If you don't, is there something else for you? If you're not suffering homelessness, do you have to go to transitional home? Where can you go that's going to hold you in that way that you were talking about earlier? Just hold them in a loving, caring way so that they could deal with this stuff of mass incarceration that they've been dealing with, 10, 20, 30. We have one woman who did 4 years. They let her out and they said, we're sorry, we violated your rights. You can go with no support at all. She's going to be in the house for about 3 years. And that's fine. And so it's I'm cool. Just reintegrate back into this society, and not assimilate, but reintegrate, figure it out what you want to do. And so that, and my goal is to either create, so we put this out there. We did a webinar on it. We did a funder briefing on it. My goal is to change the needle of how people are treated. It's I don't want the geos of the world to determine how our people are treated coming out. I want to change that needle back to like person-centered, not towards geo to where they're testing you. You're coming in every day, they're piss testing you, or you're getting searched or walking through a metal detector. Our people don't need that anymore. That's what the parole officer does. Why the hell is your house doing that to you, where you live? And so to change that, I'm going to put together basically a board of formerly incarcerated people that are directly impacted, that have done reentry work around the country. And then we're going to have funders donate to this advisory board, and they're going to decide where this funding goes. That's person-centered valued. And so we don't want to scale up a HIMSA or the HIMSA collective or our reentry homes. We want to scale up the values and the principles behind it. And wherever those homes are in these grassroots organizations around the country, fund that and get that to grow. Because what we do in Oakland, it's not going to work in Portland. It's not going to work in New York. But those values and those principles, we could multiply that. And so really just getting to that. And then, if there's some organizations out there that aren't going to that, it's like, how do we get funding to you with some restrictions that you go that way? Like, for example, if you're doing drug and alcohol testing, that's for the parole agent or the drug treatment facility. So we'll give you this funding, but like, you got to weed this out of your program so that we could get people being treated that way. And so those are my goals with all of this, and that's where my heart lies, is like treating people with, dignity and respect when they come out. They've already did their sentence. Like, we don't need to be confined out here either. And let people find their niche with all the care and support that they have, find out what their place is in this world out here without having to force them to do anything. Yeah, so like I said with my mother, she always talked about this and shared it with us. And so inside, I didn't feel like I could be involved in Native culture or in the sweat or be involved with that because of the choice of gang early on. It's like I couldn't mix the two, how the California system was conditioned. Is if you are a native, you run with the natives. And that's it, period. And then the natives ran allied with the whites and another gang inside a California system. And I was part of a gang that is on the opposite side. And so I couldn't mix the two, even though I always wanted to. In college, I'm doing thesis on NEP ceremonies and all this, and I'm like, the desire is there, but I can't go there because I can't mix the two. I wouldn't. They were like, no, you can't come over here. You're part of that. And so it was very hard. There was always that desire there, but I could never do that. And so after coming out, I went and I was like, okay. And after getting out of that gang, I was like, I want that. And it still wasn't available. I still couldn't do it. And then when I got out, I was like, oh, I'm going to do it now. I'm going to figure this out. And our community that we created with Life Comes From It, like I'm getting that, I have my elders here, Cheryl. I have Justice Yazi from the Dene people, and other people in my life now that are teaching me things and bringing back this culture in different ways. And I went back to Fort Peck, and I took my mother's ashes up there. Was very welcomed, and just went in, and some people at just the casino like welcomed me and like looked at my family tree and were like, oh yeah, you're related to so-and-so and whoop-de-whoop and this and that. And I was like, holy shit. And then people are walking by looking like my mother, and I'm like, oh no, what the hell? And so I was like, oh, this is awesome. And they're like, come back for ceremony. You just missed it. It was 2 weeks ago. And I was like, all right. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to go to the Sundance. And one of the elders there said, oh, honey, we don't do the Sundance. We do the Healing Lodge. And I was like, oh, shit. Okay, what's this? And so just became very interested, and I want to go back. I just haven't had time because I've been doing this work nonstop. And so then I went to our other reservation, which is at Wind River. Went there, went to a powwow. It was nice. And then I had the opportunity through this funding that we do with Life Comes From It. They were like, some funders came to us and they were like, hey, we want to do some land back projects. We want to figure out how we can do this. You guys, are connected. Like, go find some people, especially in Wyoming, that we could figure out how to get back, land and how to do this. And so I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I could go to Wyoming. I could reconnect with people. I went there and met somebody beforehand, had a couple of calls, and I'm going to come. This is up front what I'm doing. Like, I don't know who the money's going to go to. We're just going to report back to these people, hopefully get you all some funds to do what you're doing. We don't want to change it. We don't want to do anything different. So I went there, and I'm like, okay, and I'm feeling the same way I did here. Not as much, I mean, even more so there, not here. Feeling like not native enough. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm imposter syndrome. And so I went there, and they welcomed me, and about my second day there, we're checking out some other program, and every night I would go back and I would write down everything that I'd learned that day. Like, okay, I'm going to report this back and see what we could do. And even at the first dinner we had, I was like, so look, I'm just a messenger here. I'm just like trying to gather all this information to give it to people to see what we could do. And I think I'm doing this great thing. I'm like, oh my God, I'm coming back. And I could connect you with some resources. And so then the second day, the person that I went there with, she was like, yeah, you know, I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm like, oh, don't matter to me. I'm good. Like, it doesn't matter to me. She's like, yeah, so is my boyfriend. I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. I'm good with that. So am I. And so didn't think nothing of it. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care why you were incarcerated, what you did. Like, you made it out. You're doing great work. Like, and you're just a human. And so come that, a day goes by, 2 days go by, then I get this phone call at night. And she's like, hey, I know, are you who you say you are? And I'm like, huh? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, I Googled you. And I was like, okay. And she goes, oh, you did some shit to some children. I said, oh, you Googled the wrong person. And she's like, no, well, I already called some people and like they might come and just take you off the reservation. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And I'm like, well, I said, you want to know what I did? You could have just asked me. And I told her on the phone, and she was like, oh shit, I'm sorry. I'm like, yeah, you got the wrong person. And I said, you could have asked me and I would have told you. And she was like, and the person's house I was staying at, she says, you shouldn't stay, like all this before that, she was like, you shouldn't stay there because they're going to get in trouble for you staying there. And I'm like, what the hell is going on right here? And she's like, I didn't know if you were here to steal our children and our women. I'm like, whoa, this is a lot of shit that's being put on me, projected onto me. I had no idea about, like, and I'm like, okay, and now I no longer feel safe. I'm like, I need to get the hell out of here. I don't know what's going to happen to me. And she goes, oh, I apologize. Just let it all go. Where can we meet tomorrow? I was like, oh shit, what? I was like, okay. She said, oh, we'll just sage it off. And I'm like, okay. I was like, and she's like, and we need to hold you accountable. So we need to have a circle, an RJ circle. And I said, you want to hold me accountable for what? You should have told me that you were formerly incarcerated before you came. And I said, I should have? She goes, yeah. I said, well, I don't lead off with my identity as a trauma. I don't lead off with that. That's not how I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Richard. I'm formerly incarcerated. Nice to meet you. Like, no, that's not what I do. Yeah, I'm not I wouldn't expect somebody to, hey, I've been raped. No, like, don't, like, that's not me. That's something that happened to me. It's not me. And so really getting into, I was like, yeah, she goes, yeah, well, we want to hold you accountable for not. And I was like, she goes, because that's what you should have did. I said, well, why didn't you tell me before I came here that you were formerly incarcerated? Oh, well, no, but you should have told us. And I was like, yeah, she had no answer for this. And so I was like, this is crazy. So I was like, but if you want to have a circle, let's have a circle. And so me, Sonia, Seth, all these people, and then she called in somebody else that, I don't know who this person was, but they had learned how to weaponize RJ processes and accountability. And so, yeah, we get on this phone call and they're like, yeah, you're not tribal. You're not tribal enough. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I was like, well, what you're asking me to do is every person I meet, you want me to tell them the most shameful thing I did in my life as soon as I meet them. And, well, you should have told us. I said, no, I'm fine with that. I could do that right now. but let's go around the circle and everybody do that. Let's create some equality and some equity here. Oh, no, we're not doing that. And so like that, and then I just like, okay, I'm done. Like, you know, it was this whole thing of like, now you're a colonizer, you came here to colonize and like all this. And so I said, I'm gone. I'm out of here. And it gets worse. I get to the airport and there's one airport and this little thing breaks in the radar tower and I can't leave. So I'm like stuck there. They're like, yeah, we don't know when it's going to be fixed. And I'm like, this is crazy. And so then me and somebody else in the airport rented a car, and the lady at the counter drove us to the next city, and then she brought the car back. And so, yeah, I finally got out of there about a day and a half, 2 days later. But yeah, and so all that to say is like me trying to come back, like in some instances where I went to Fort Peck, I was very welcome. In some instances, I wasn't. And so really like, oh, but you're a lost bird, welcome back. But then treated like this, I don't feel like I want to go back. And so there's been like, and at the same time, I'm like, it wasn't my fault that we were brought to California. You know, it wasn't our fault that we got relocated or adopted or displaced. And so, like, that's why I say, like, I've figured out who my tribe is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be by blood, but just by beliefs and values. I'm like, oh, this is my tribe right here. And like, those are my relations, those are my people. And I find them all over the country, different races, different ethnicities. It's like we were just talking earlier, I love Cameron. Like we got it's a friend of hers too. And the moment we met, me and Cameron are all over each other. So I'm like, what the hell's going on with you two? It's like, no. And so it's just like, I meet people all over the country and getting accepted in that way. And I'm still going to keep going back. And I'm still going to keep trying. And I'm still going to build that community because I want it.